Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Adrenal Fatigue Podcast. It's Danielle Zeese and Angela Rocchio here, your hosts and the founders of the Adrenal Recovery Collective. And today we're so excited because we are having a conversation with Melissa Ramos all about autoimmune conditions and the adrenal fatigue picture. Like us, Melissa believes that if you are struggling with autoimmune flare-ups or nasty symptoms that go along with your autoimmune condition, it's really hard to get a grasp on them without dealing with the stress in your life. In this episode, we really break down some great questions you can ask yourself and share some practical tips that you can implement right away, oftentimes for free, that truly make a huge impact in helping you get a better handle on your stress. These tips are going to help you feel better on so many levels, not just hormones, not just adrenals, but just truly body, mind, and spirit. And if you are struggling with autoimmune conditions, these are going to be helpful in helping you getting those symptoms under control. So this is going to be a great conversation. So excited to have it. I'm going to pass the torch off to Angela to introduce Melissa, and we'll jump right in from there with the questions.
So Melissa Ramos is the whip smart women's health expert behind Sexy Food Therapy, where she helps women balance their hormones and digestion for regular periods and poops. As a nutritionist with a background in Chinese medicine, she uses a three-pronged approach of nutrition, supplementation, and lifestyle changes to help our clients heal. In addition to sharing innovative tips and recipes via her own hilarious YouTube videos, Melissa is a health expert for CTV's The Social, a TEDx speaker, and official health writer for the Huffington Post, and was named one of Canada's rising stars in the health industry by Flair magazine. When she's not helping her online community of over 600 ballers heal their hormones in her signature program, Sexy Lady Balls, you will find Melissa getting her sweat on, spending time outdoors, or creating a delicious hormone healthy recipe. You can learn more about how Melissa can help you heal your hormones and get started with her free health assessment over at sexyfoodtherapy.com.
Amazing. So, and actually, when I was starting out on my adrenal fatigue journey, Melissa was one of the first gurus in this industry that I found. And I did her stress detox, which was a program she was running like 10 years ago, like a really long time ago. But it was the first time I had ever put together the deeper connection to stress with the traditional Chinese medicine approach, where we had like looking at what's going on with your liver. We were looking at the adrenals and kind of looking at the full big picture. For me, that was really new it was before I was even in nutrition school. So Melissa is just one of my like founding mentors, and it's such an honor to have her here on the podcast today.
Yay.
Welcome, Melissa. We're so pleased to have you here today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
So we know that you've had some firsthand experience with hormonal imbalances, adrenal stuff, and autoimmunity. So for those in our community who might not be familiar with your story and how you got kind of started with this and your journey so far, do you mind sharing a little bit about it in a nutshell?
Yeah, it's when I was looking over it, just thinking about adrenal fatigue and my history with this, it isn't just the mental stress that kind of brought me to that whole adrenal fatigue component. It's also the physical stress, because that's the part I think a lot of people forget about when it comes to adrenal fatigue. It isn't just the mental, it's also the physical. So for me personally, having been someone who was a token workaholic, and go, very codependent, and not even realizing that I was codependent with my work, I just got so burnt out. And I'd always thought, especially with that, and having led to a host of other issues, from an ovarian cyst that had ruptured and it tore off a piece of my right ovary and I almost bled to death. They had to do an emergency surgery on me. And you think of ovarian cysts and you don't necessarily think of the adrenal fatigue component, but it is one of the pieces that played a really big role in my health. And then later on, fast forward, I had been accidentally diagnosed with fibroids. And I say accidentally in kind of a light way, only because of the fact that had I not have received the report, which I had asked for, and I suggest everybody does this, get reports of everything, because the doctor had given me a clean bill of health. He said, no, we didn't see anything. And then when I dug into my purse and saw that report, I was like, why on earth wouldn't you tell me that I had fibroids when I came in complaining of pelvic pain? right? And we don't think, again, adrenal fatigue is a part of that component, but it is a part of the fibroid component. It isn't the only thing, but it's definitely a piece of it. And then fast forward even afterwards, in 2017, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, an autoimmune thyroid condition, which affects about 97% of the people who have hypothyroidism. And in any thyroid cases, whether it is hyper or hypo, there is definitely going to be an adrenal fatigue component in that as well. So that is kind of my health journey in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing. And wow, 97% of people with hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
And so that is a big chunk of our community out there too.
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah, and your experience doing this work for yourself and those that you support in your community, how big is the stress adrenal piece you see? And are there any big physical, emotional stressors that you see coming up more often than others with your clients?
I think it's a piece of it for everybody, to be honest with you. I think that even the people that we see in the industry, or maybe even outside of our industry that we greatly admire, I think everybody is always trying to keep some level of balance, and then putting the bunny ears up in case, some people might be listening to the audio part of this and not just the visual part. But I think it affects everybody. And we're always trying to maintain some level of balance. Can I swear on this podcast by chance or no?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So it's bullshit. Balance is bullshit, right? And it's something that everyone's always trying to attain, but it really becomes with having to adjust our lives as needed to be able to get what we require in life. And I think that everyone is so attached to whether it is the supplements, especially when it's adrenal fatigue. Okay, what supplement can I take? What supplement can I take? And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, amongst a host of many others, is they're just not getting enough sleep. Women need 20 minutes more sleep than our male counterparts. 20. And I think that is probably much higher, but so many women will go to bed with their partners. And I'm like, you don't need to stay up until he goes to bed. I know that that's, your time together, but it robs you of your next day. So I think that that's also a component, is the sleep deprivation part. They'll take supplements before they actually get sleep. It's like, I got to watch another, episode of, I don't know, whatever show it is that they're watching. And then also nervous system regulation. So if we look at the role that trauma plays with our adrenals, is quite huge. Like, it took me, ladies, over 40 years to figure out how to feel. I know that sounds ridiculous, but think of this for a second. When you think of feelings, you think of happy, sad, frustrated or angry, but these aren't feelings. Okay. These are labels that we fixate on these feelings, but feelings are actually resonances that we feel within our body. And oftentimes, if somebody triggers you, that maybe is catapulting you into that level of adrenal stress, which I see, who the heck here doesn't get triggered? I mean, we all get triggered, let's face it, right? But whatever it is, sometimes we isolate that and think, well, it's because of that person and that experience that I am feeling this way. But then what we fail to realize is that emotional resonance in the body, say it's in your chest or your gut or your thyroid, wherever it is, we have felt that resonance many a times before, but have never actually associated it to be the same resonance. And what we're seeing is that oftentimes it happens up until the age of 7, up until 5, 7 years old. So think about it. Do you remember, some of the things that happened to you really early on? And oftentimes our earliest memory isn't always the most positive. So, and then these begin to afflict us as adults. We're all, adult human being bodies walking around, but we're children. It's these unintegrated children walking around and wondering why we're all so darn burnt out. But we're burnt out because if we're not integrating those pieces from our trauma story, of which, people sometimes think of trauma as this big, massive thing, but it could be something that maybe a kid said something to you early on in your life that really affected you, that is stuck with you. Now, every single time someone says something to you, it's instantly it hits you. For me, it always hit my thyroid. And it would put me into that sympathetic fight or flight state. And not even realizing that was the case. Well, that's going to influence us from a physical perspective. right? So from that perspective, I think everybody has that piece. And then from a physical component, is it pathogenic related? Because just because we're stressed because of our, unruly mother-in-law, or because of our boss, or because of finances, or what have you, cool. Okay. Or maybe not cool. But then you look at the physical things that could be affecting our body. Well, if it's pathogenic related, whether it's parasitic, mycotoxins from mold toxicity, that that tells our body that we're stressed. Our nervous system responds appropriately. And then that's when I start to see women come into practice with like a truckload of supplements. But I've been working and my cortisol levels are still high, or they're really bottomed out. Why is this the case? I'm sleeping, I'm meditating. And I'm like, because you probably haven't investigated the physical aspect. So I think the part that people are really misled when it comes to adrenal fatigue is that it's just the mental part. And that's simply not the case.
I think that's such a good point. When we hear people talking about stress, we automatically go to like the mental emotional piece and not necessarily the physical, which I think, and I kind of see it on both sides. Either people focus mainly on the physical and forget about the mental emotional, or the opposite, like you were saying. So yeah, I can't agree more. And I love how you brought up, there's a lot to unpack there that you said, which I love. But we don't make sleep a priority. I think that's a big piece. That I see a lot, especially with women, as we are caretakers, as we are mothers, or whatever we're caring for, that we often tend to not make sleep a priority, or for whatever reason. And I think that can make a huge difference. We always talk about like, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Sometimes what's the biggest bang for your buck? And it's like, we always go to like sleep, making sleep a priority. And it's not easy for everybody. I mean, it's definitely not an easy thing for many people, right? As like when your hormones are off, sleep is off, and vice versa. So it isn't an easy thing to tackle sometimes, but
it isn't. At the same token, it's like we have to evaluate why it's difficult.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is sleep deprivation difficult for you because your circadian rhythms are off?
Exactly.
So like, we have people walking around with sunglasses throughout the day, blocking out the light energy that our eyes need to actually take in to tell our bodies we're awake. And then at night you're glued to your device. What do you expect? I mean,
Yeah.
I can literally, I was saying this to my husband the other day, I can be on my phone right before bed for, I kid you not, for like less than like a couple of minutes. And then I evaluate my heart rate variability, which is a sign of how well your nervous system is responding, the following day. And it tanks it, And so this is like, people go to bed with their cell phones, right? And then I think that also when we see women the amount of women that come to me and complain about how expensive it is to be healthy. And I'm like, do not complain about this shit unless you do the few things which you're not doing that are free. Sleep being one of them, and you don't have to love everything until you cease to exist. It doesn't have to be that way, but you're choosing that. So you also have to evaluate, where am I choosing that, and where can I take radical responsibility for why I'm in this position to begin with, because that's where the starting point always is.
Well, yeah, like you said, it's a lot of lifestyle changes. That's part of your three-pronged approach, which we totally agree on. And so that piece of it is really important. We need to change some of those habits, especially around sleep. And sometimes that just comes from childhood too. For a lot of people, I've found is, just kind of poor sleep hygiene for most of their life. And when we can start to switch that with clients, right, we can kind of see things happen really quickly when people are getting quality, good sleep over a period of time. So cool. And I love you brought up the trauma piece, and sort of like what we say, capital T, lowercase t traumas, that those that are always kind of playing in the background of our lives are affecting us and affecting, how we respond to life as adults, And I tell my kids this all the time, like, I'm just a kid just like you are. I'm just in a bigger body, So anyway, I love that you brought that up, that we are just these little beings that maybe never got the love and the feeling of safety and caring that we all deserved. And then it plays out in our lives, and we kind of don't really get that connection, and how that is so connected, right? You said, to the nervous system, which is, all about the HPA axis, right? It's like, it's brain, it's nervous system, it's the endocrine system. So anyway, I love that you brought all that up. So good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's a part that's so overlooked. So I'm glad you guys talk about that with your people, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the idea of radical responsibility. And so like, there's always one thing, and I see it when we're talking about like devices and looking, Netflixing late into the evening. can be hard things that we actually like don't want to face. Like we want to look at all the other things you mentioned, supplements, right? That's like one thing that we can do that's a little bit more simple. Might be expensive, but it's simple to pop a pill, but it's not easy to change these habits that, just lying in bed at night, scrolling on our phone, like it's harder to shake that from a routine. But the radical responsibility is kind of like acknowledging that you're doing that, starts with awareness, right? And then making a little game plan to reduce the amount and eventually make that change completely. So it's
Yeah,
huge.
and honestly, it's like, do these people, like for people listening in, do you actually truly want to get better?
Mhm.
And the majority of people will say, well, of course I do. I mean, I would have said that. But at the same token, like you were saying, we all have, the little T or the big T for trauma. But one thing that I had to ask myself when it came to where I was at in my own recovery, was wondering, how is this state, this mucky, painful, tired, exhausted state, how is it actually serving me? And most people are like, it's not serving me. Oh, hell yeah, it's serving you. For 1,000%, it's serving you. Do you find yourself talking a lot about how shitty you feel, how tired you feel, how you do everything for everybody else and no one does anything for you? Because maybe it's a way that you're trying to validate your self-worth. Maybe it's where you're trying to prove your worth to other people. For me, I remember thinking to myself, if I'm talking about how crappy I feel, like a broken record, even though it feels like I'm trying to co-regulate, and that's maybe my excuse, I'm trying to co-regulate with my partner, regulate my nervous system. When in actuality, if I had to think about him and being in his shoes to hear his wife continually talk about how miserable she felt, how enjoyable is that? Now this is just a reality, right? It's a harsh one, a harsh pill to swallow, but it was one. And I start to think, well, where am I benefiting from being a victim?
Mhm.
And then I started to realize that where I was benefiting from that pain was that I was looking for the compassion and the empathy that in actuality I had never given to myself.
Mhm.
And a lot of that, at least in my own personality, was, if I looked at my own traumas, it was from not being seen. Everybody wants to be seen. They want to belong. They want to be loved. That's really the core, integral things that everybody deserves to be, a functioning human being. But I think before we even look at strategies and tactics of, yes, take accountability for yourself, absolutely. But dig deep and ask yourself, how has this actually been benefiting me? Because you'd be kidding yourself if you didn't think that was the case.
Absolutely love that. And I feel like I went through my own struggle with that as well. And an awakening moment in my own journey of realizing that I was in victim mode. And we see it a lot, with our community, and we totally get it. Like, we have compassion because we've been there. But I love how you're, that ownership of just like, this is like pulling yourself up the bootstraps and like figuring it out. Because I always like to say, like, this is have served you, this way of life, really, it is sort of a way of life, your identity for a long time, and it served you for a long time. Maybe maybe it has, and maybe it hasn't, but like, are you willing to, do you want it to continue to serve you? You can't have both. So are you? And I remember the one quote that I put up in my room when I was healing was like, which I'd actually even change now, but it really helped me change my mindset, was, even if it's not my fault, it's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Because maybe it wasn't my fault that I didn't feel, like you were saying, I can relate to that so much. Like, even though it wasn't my fault that I didn't feel completely loved or taken care of, or I felt this neglect when certain family situations happened. Maybe that wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility, if I want to break this cycle, to start taking responsibility and do what I need to do to change it. So I'm loving, you're bringing some really some deep topics up, and I really love it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think that sometimes we are in a society that is obsessed with healing. Obsessed.
Interesting
Well, I
perspective.
gotta heal. I gotta heal. I have to heal. And so with this obsession, the question then is, are we staying stuck in that same place that we're at, that we're trying to get out of? Because when we say that we're trying to heal, or I'm healing, or my healing journey. I'm not saying it's incorrect. It's just a question to ponder for everybody listening. When we're saying that, are we not actually implying that we're broken to begin with? And if that's the case, isn't it a really shitty place to build a foundation from?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like one of my favorite books is from an author by the name of Michael Brown. The book is called The Presence Process. So presence as in not like gifts you receive, but like presence, like your presence. So presence process, or if you're American, process. The book literally really helped to change a lot of my viewpoints on healing, because he was saying like, it's really just integration. And if you've ever read Women Who Run with Wolves, which is an extremely dense book, but rich in lessons, I literally just finished reading an entire passage about adrenal fatigue. I mean, essentially burnout is what she was saying. And what they do is they take these stories, these beautiful fairy tale stories, and then they bring it into the context of modern day. And one part was about returning home to oneself, and that remembering that it's really not about healing. It's about coming home to yourself. And every single time that we're so burnt out, it's escaping ourselves. It's sedating. It's something. But then when we return home, because our bodies are always going to feel it faster than our minds think it. Like even to this day, there's times where, you know, I cycle through burnout and I literally think, oh, no, I'm good. I can keep going because I'm so used to pushing through. I have a very strong work ethic. And then I realized, oh shit, no, I'm actually headed towards burnout. Like I need to slow down. And then the question becomes, why am I trying to push through? Why am I on such a fast trajectory? So if that's you and you're in cycles of burnout, why are you racing? Is there a scarcity mentality? It's like, just keep being the annoying child who continually asks why, because it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So many good questions. And I'd love to bring that into the autoimmune connection if we can.
Yeah.
So Melissa, do you think it's possible to get a handle on your autoimmune flare-ups and the symptoms without addressing the adrenals? And when I say adrenals, I'm just kind of nutshelling all of the stressors we're just talking about right now.
I don't think so. I think that, you know, there's research to show that people who have autoimmune conditions that, you know, there's a lot of trauma in the past. I have people who get really triggered when I say that, because some people will say, well, my 5-year-old child has an autoimmune condition. Like, how the hell does he have all these big traumas? And I'm like, well, just read It Didn't Start With You, that book, and you're going to learn a lot about inherited trauma and that it could be passed down through like 7 generations. So who knows if what we're carrying is ours to begin with. So do I think that autoimmunity can be, you know, that you can gain progress without the adrenal component? No, I don't. I think that whether it's autoimmune, whether it's complete hormonal chaos, of which both can coexist at the same time, we also have to remember that it's gravely important to understand that everyone has the same pieces. We have pieces of the puzzles, okay? So adrenals is maybe a piece of the puzzle. Pathogens is maybe another one, like just add on little puzzles. And some people have more of those puzzle pieces from those various categories than others. So why somebody has an autoimmune condition can greatly differ than the causative factors that affected somebody who has the exact same autoimmune condition. And this is where people go, well, this helped my cousin or somebody that worked with my sister, you know, and it's like, but it doesn't work that way. This is very individualized. How is this actually affecting you? Right. So yeah, I think that the adrenals has to be worked on, because so much of the adrenal perspective, like, listen, supplements are fantastic. I use them in practice, obviously. But sometimes I think some of the biggest things for our adrenal health that can actually help to support us is not supplement based. And that's where people, I think, fail a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And now a quick word from our episode sponsor, the Fatigue to Fabulous program.
If you've been struggling with getting your energy back, we want you to know that affordable support is available in our Fatigue to Fabulous membership program. We invite you to finally balance your hormones, pinpoint the underlying root issues behind your symptoms, rewire your nervous system, and dial in your nutrition, supplements, and so much more via our online hub. You will also get access to live coaching from integrative experts and the support of our amazing recovery community. If you're ready to take the next step, come join us in the Fatigue to Fabulous monthly membership, where you'll get instant access to a complete recovery system. If you are ready, you can find the link in the show notes or visit www.theadrenalrecoverycollective.com and click the pink button to get your full recovery system so you can start getting the results you want today.
So if you could address members of our community who are stuck and feeling overwhelmed right now, what are some simple things that they could start doing today?
So the first thing is, if you're feeling super overwhelmed, which has definitely been a default of mine in the past, where I'm just like, oh, I can't. And you're like, I got to race to fix something, but I can't, right? Like, it's that kind of overwhelmed feeling. Number one, I would highly suggest some basic free tools. Number one, get sleep. Prioritize sleep, and sleep like your life depends on it, because it does. It's free. Okay. So that's first and foremost. And if you go to bed at like midnight, I'm not saying, okay, well, now go to bed at 9. Maybe you're starting to work down by 15-minute increments and start, not being in front of your TV right before you go to bed, or being in front of your cell phone right before you go to bed, because it is going to affect you, even with blue light blocking glasses. When you wake up, get outside within the first hour. And even if it's overcast, go for a walk, 10-15-minute walk, because it's going to help to signal to your body, hey, I'm awake. And when you're going to bed, circadian rhythms are governed by light and temperature. So it's like you get light during the day, and then in the evening, there should be the absence of it. So make sure you dim your light about a couple of hours before bed. Unless, of course, you're my husband and he's like turning on all the lights in the evening.
Oh,
And I'm like, what is wrong with you?
This is like a constant issue in my household.
Oh,
stop!
He's literally turning on all the lights. And I'm like, do you understand that we have to turn down the lights? And then in the morning, everything is like a cave, and we already live in a tiny home. So it's like, it affects us all, right?
Oh my God. So funny.
I'm a really big proponent of cold showers. Listen, guys, they suck. They're never easier. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh yeah, they get easier. They don't. But what the thing I always say to myself before I go into to end with a cold shower, and yes, as cold as you possibly can, is don't think, just do. Because if you think, you're going to think your way out of it. And I also ask myself, but are you going to die? The answer is no. The person who shouldn't be doing cold showers is if you're pregnant. I don't do them right before my period, so several days before my period, or during the heaviest days of my bleed. And high blood pressure, definitely, I would caution against them. But circadian rhythms, to be able to support your adrenals, are governed by light and temperature. So that's definitely one part. And also, when you're feeling overwhelmed, there are many, many, many nervous system exercises. But one of my favorite ones, especially if you are somebody who lives in a fight or flight mode, is understand that your field of vision narrows when you are in these states, because you're thinking like, my field of vision is going to narrow so I can like attack that bear that's coming at me. Right. And so we see even in research that when we're in that state, we actually can interpret the sound of someone's voice incorrectly. We can actually interpret their facial gestures incorrectly, because we're seeing it through and hearing it through a specific, vision or auditory sense. So one of the best things that I do for myself when I'm in that state is I add in movement, whether definitely not meditating, because try to meditate when you're overwhelmed, it's not going to help. You're going to want to crawl out of your skin. So for me, it's walking. I have dogs, so it's always a welcome for them to be like, yeah, okay, let's go. So we do the WALK, because I can't say that word. And the other thing is when I feel like, okay, it's starting to lessen that overwhelm, even if it's like by 5 or 10%, what I do is I increase my field of vision. There's several ways you can do this. My favorite one is laying on my back, getting my hands in a little web like this and putting them, cradling the back of my head. And I'm laying down flat on my back. You can have the soles of your feet on the ground, or you can have your legs stretched out in front of you. And then what I do is, without turning my head, I look all the way to the right and I hold it for 30 seconds to a minute. And when I'm done, I bring that field of vision back to center, and then I do it all to the left. And what that's doing, you're going to notice, is you're going to start to yawn. You might start to sigh. You might start to swallow. And these are all cues that your body's starting to go into a parasympathetic state. It might be very difficult for you to do this right when you're at that heightened level of like, oh, I gotta do something right now. And I'm so overwhelmed. Holy crap, everything is falling apart and I'm catastrophizing. The world is falling and I'm just gonna snap at customer service on the phone because I'm pissed, right? So that's where I'm like, move the energy. And then when it just takes off the edge just a little bit, do that exercise and you're gonna see how that's gonna change.
Amazing.
Drink water, please. Like, stay hydrated. Oh, and that's the last thing. So last but not least, when it comes to this, I've gotten away from the drink half your body weight in ounces of water. I'm not saying water is the devil, okay, guys? But what I am saying is I'm trying to encourage myself to drink more herbal teas rather than just going to water, because we need minerals, right? So if we're always just drinking water and we're not taking into account the mineral status, is our body actually being properly hydrated, right? So like even now I've got like a tea. It's still pretty hot, but I just put a little baggie of herbs and tied it up, put it into a mason jar, and it's going to sit there and I'm going to drink that as one of my liters of water. You can do that overnight, so then the next day it's cool, but I challenge you to also drink mineral rich sources of water.
Love that. I'm actually have a little bit of nettle right here as we speak.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Such a good one. Okay, that's great advice, Melissa. Thank you so much.
No
And
problem.
I feel like you are just the queen of juicy tidbits and like cool recipes and just fun health modalities. Your Instagram's definitely full of them. But is there anything that you're loving these days that you'd love to share with our community?
What am I loving these days that I would like to share with the community? I think one of the things that I am super passionate about is probably the effects of trauma on the body, nervous system health, and definitely parasitic infection, because I find they're fascinating. Because a lot of people who've just got longstanding parasitic infection don't even realize that this is one of the factors why they have and are struggling with adrenal fatigue. And then people go, oh God, really? Parasites? I don't have parasites. Or you can't have parasites. You're so darn healthy. And I'm like, if you have a pulse, you have a parasite. This is one of the quotes in the functional medical world, and it's the truth. So I find it really, really, really a fascinating field of study. So those would probably be the top juicy little tidbits of things that I'm super stoked about lately.
Amazing. Thank you. And I know you're big on your red light therapy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to get me one of those.
Yeah, I love biohacking tools. I think I drive my husband a little crazy because he's like, what? Like, we live in a tiny home. Okay. And I mean, I think it probably would be standard if you live in like New York, or if you live in, a city like Toronto or something. 500 square feet doesn't probably seems like a mansion in some cities, but out here in the mountains, it's a tiny home. And he's like, how many more biohacking tools are you going to get? Red light therapy is one that I absolutely love. In Canadian winters, it gets pretty, abysmal, pretty gray. So I have found it's been super helpful. And now it's like, wow, it's getting so much darker, so much earlier. It's getting darker, so much earlier, even like later on, and I'm not, it's the part I think that I struggle with the most. So the red light therapy has helped greatly with that. So much so is that I have two dogs. Bodhi is the little blonde cockapoo, but he always ends up sitting on my lap every single time that I do the red light therapy. Like, he just loves it. So I just think it's a really nice, nourishing little practice. And I really encourage people to consider, like, what are your routines in the morning and the evening? But I think sometimes people are like searching to try to replicate a routine that they saw an influencer do. And then I'm always like, well, what do you want to do? What do you like? I had one woman who used to smoke. Okay. She used to smoke cigarettes. She hadn't smoked cigarettes in 15 years or something. And she's always trying to figure out this morning routine, and it never felt authentic to her. So she never kept it up. And so she realized that one of the things she loved to do when she used to be a smoker was she'd go outside in the morning and have a cigarette. So what she started to do as a non-smoker, 15 years being a non-smoker, she would go outside into her backyard and just sit in her backyard chair and just watch the sunrise, because she would do that when she was a smoker, but she stopped doing it. And she's like, it's one of my favorite parts of my morning routine. So I encourage people to consider what's going to resonate with you. And also, don't get tied to a specific routine, because I don't know about you ladies, but have you ever done a routine in the morning and it was like, okay, this is working for me right now. I'm rocking and rolling. This is good. And all of a sudden you kind of get to a point where you're like, I'm kind of bored of this.
Yeah.
And then you got to like shake it up. And it's like, it's just, don't get tied to it. And then understand that you can shift and change things. You know, the one thing I do want to mention that I've been thinking so heavily about lately is this notion of impermanence. And I don't know how much you guys know about the Buddhist philosophy of impermanence, but impermanence just simply means that nothing ever stays the same. Now, this is a really great thing to think about when you are in the weeds of something really awful happening in your life. Like life is just handing you a lot of lemons, and it's not making lemonade right now. So life's pretty awful, for example. Okay. So it's kind of, you take some comfort in thinking about impermanence. Things will change. But then the opposite is true, that when things are really good in your life, the idea of impermanence can feel a little unsettling, because things will always change. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because it's one of the things that always brings me back to the present moment, because it's all that we have. And we know this, like every single self-help book talks about be present, be present, be present, right? And when you're in adrenal fatigue, it's the last thing that you are is being present. Yeah. So if you don't have yesterday, you don't have tomorrow, understand that things are always changing. So be with it right here, right now, even if it's in the poop that you're in, or it's in the absolute glory of relishing in that present time. Because it's so easy to feel grateful when things are going well. It's much harder when things are not going well. So the idea of impermanence is something that's really been sticking with me lately.
I love that. And a timely time to just wrap our heads around that and have that as a nice reminder as the seasons change, right?
Oh yeah. It's just to let it go, especially like with fall. It's like, what can you no longer, like, what is no longer serving you here? And can we flow with the seasons? Because I love that you brought over the season change, because, you know, the fall is the season of the lungs in Chinese medicine, which, you know, we talk about immune function, etc. But then you go into the winter. The winter's about the kidneys in Chinese medicine. They don't talk about the adrenals, but the adrenals are like little toques, or if you're American, beanies that sit on top of your adrenals. So in the winter, it's the time to root and ground yourself more than any other season. But people don't do this. All of a sudden, December comes around, they have to go travel to go see family for vacations. And then like, that's not exactly fun. And then you've got someone questioning you about your dietary choices. And why are you looking so thin? Or why are you looking so overweight? And it's just the stress of all of it and running around trying to get everything done. So grounding is not in the forefront of people's mind. The problem then becomes springtime comes afterwards, right? So think of a flower that needed to be rooted, right? During the winter time, their roots have to grow in that time. Because if it doesn't, once the springtime comes, that sweet little flower is just like flops over to its side. And it feels very, I mean, I'm saying this metaphorically, but it feels very unsettling, right? People come and they feel unsettled. They feel depressed. They feel overwhelmed, and they don't know why. And I'm like, how was your winter? How did your winter look like? And that's where you start to get why they feel so crummy in the springtime, right? So I think flowing through the seasons is so absolutely vital, but most people don't think of it. They don't think about adjusting even their sleep cycles with the winter. I go to bed earlier in the winter time. It's darker. Why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. But they're still trying to live the same way they did, you know, in the summertime. In the winter, it's not going to fly. It's no different than a woman who goes through reverse puberty and perimenopause, who is still burning the candle at both ends, super codependent, saying, I sacrifice myself to it. I'm just doing everything for everybody else and no one does anything for me. And she's running ragged because she's thinking that she can still pull the same things that she did in her 30s and it can fly where she's at now. It doesn't fly anymore. Adrenal fatigue is way more prevalent in those times of a woman's life, is through perimenopause, because your ovaries start to lose their function. So now that whole endocrine system, that whole hormonal symphony starts to sound out of tune, because the adrenals have to do so much more work. So if you are not reassessing your life and changing how you show up based on seasons of your life and seasons of nature, you're going to be smacked with a huge anvil of burnout.
Mm.
So
Such a
important.
good, such a fun conversation.
Yeah.
And really the importance of really nourishing and figuring out what nourishes us as an individual, not what somebody tells you, a guru says, like, this is what you should do. Like, really find what works for you, really what feels good in your heart, and reassessing that every single day. I love that with my clients. It's like, yeah, well, I'll help you create a routine that'll support you in these different areas of your life. But I really want you every morning to question, like, what is it today that's really, what do I really require today?
Yeah.
Because that's just changes all the time.
Yeah.
And we also have to be okay with not being in judgment of, like, oh, I'm going off the routine that Angela told me about,
Yes.
No, it's all good, girl. You go do your
Yeah.
thing, but you keep asking questions,
I love that. I love that. It's like, ask yourself, how does this feel for me? And the thing is, if you see a lot of people, they're like the snooze button connoisseur, right? They smack it, like thinking that those extra 10 minutes are going to give them like an hour's worth of sleep. We know that's not the case, right? And so you keep doing that, and then they're just like racing through the day. Most people have a non-negotiable time they have to wake up, but they don't have a non-negotiable time when they have to go to sleep, right? So they kind of like cut corners in one way where they don't the other. And by not tuning in the morning, you check out every single day. And if you can't check in the morning, how on earth are you going to be able to understand what's going to feel good for you in that day? Forget about everybody else. How is it going to feel good for you? Right? So I think that that's huge. And also the non-judgment piece is massive. We're so freaking hard on ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves. And to be honest with you, it's like everybody has their own shit. Like, it's just stop judging yourselves based on somebody else. And even if that means that you have to mute people on social media, that I'm not saying that they make you feel like crap, but maybe something about them is triggering something in you, and maybe you just don't need that energy. So maybe just mute people, right? So that you can be able to show up in your best possible way. But like, social media, it can be such a toxic environment. And I recently started to think about, and this is such a personal business choice, so no judgment here to anybody, but for the longest time, I would push out content 7 days a week. Okay. And that meant maybe I showed up 5 days a week, and then I scheduled content on the weekends to make it appear that I'm still there. Right. And then I started to ask myself, am I promoting this perception that I'm available every single day? Because the average person who doesn't run an online business, they don't know about scheduling apps. They don't know that Saturday post that just came out wasn't you that's available. So am I encouraging other people to think that I'm on 24/7? Like, does your brick and mortar business have to promote the perception that they're on every single day? So I was like, screw this. I'm not doing this anymore. So I decided that on the weekends, I'm going to go completely silent on social media. Now, with that said, on Facebook, I do have a scheduling app, which is like from like literally a year ago, that thing. So I'm not super active on Facebook, but on Instagram I am. So on Instagram, you see that I go completely dead silent on the weekends. And so when I got back from Ontario from seeing my folks, and I came back to BC, it was like trains, planes, and automobiles mixed in with a couple of hotels. It was a really long journey because I live like 3 hours away from the nearest airport. And so I came back, and Tuesday I was like, I am dead tired. I just got back yesterday. And I decided I'm going to go dead silent today. I'm going to take the day off. Well, then that became Wednesday. I'm taking the day off. Thursday, I'm taking the day off. Friday, I'm taking the day off. I took 6 days off of social media, flat out, like completely quiet on Instagram. Now, this might not seem like a big deal to some people, but the reason why I bring this up is I've never actually done that in my entire career. And I thought, and you know what happened? My account still grew by over 100 followers that week. And I thought, I'm just promoting other people to have this perception that I'm always available So are we enabling people as entrepreneurs? And what is that doing to us? Right? Because when you leave to go on vacation, aren't you working double time to be able to make sure that there's enough content available for when you're gone? Aren't you batching content to do that? And then if you are, by the time you get to vacation, you're like, oh, I'm so exhausted. Man, I had to get so much work done before I left. Why can't you just be off?
Right. I love it. Yeah, setting a new precedence I think is so important, and that we don't always have to be on, and that, you know, it's good for us to take care of ourselves too. Whether an entrepreneur or not, you know, really just like, how do we put ourselves first? I love it.
Yeah.
So, kind of switching gears, we want to talk a little bit about functional tests before we end today. I was curious on where you typically start. And do you feel like it's possible to address all of this stuff without these tests?
And maybe before, sorry, Melissa, to interrupt, but before you dive in, you did mention the parasites, and I could see that maybe some people would like listen and be like, oh, I have a parasite, I need to get a parasite cleanse, and like start with that. And so, yeah, I feel like this is a good place to have this conversation around functional testing, and before maybe running and doing a formula, like, you know, these parasite cleanses on the market.
Yeah, because the parasite cleanses, like at your health food store, aren't enough to detox a hamster. Like, it's just the fact. So I think people go, I did this one from the health food store, and she said this one's going to be great. So I don't believe that those really work. Now, I think that there's a lot people can do if they're short strapped, if they're like really tightly strapped financially, that they can begin on a lot of the things that we spoke about already on this podcast, because those key lifestyle things, you guys listening, I don't think you realize how much they can change your world if you are actually committed to your health. And commitment's different than consistency. Commitment allows for flexibility. It's not linear. Consistency, in my vision, is very like fixated. I gotta do this every single day, otherwise I'm a failure. And that's just, that's not where I operate from. So functionally, I do not start with hormone testing, because hormones are messengers. What's affecting them? I don't say hormone testing is inaccurate. I don't think it's a complete waste of money. We still offer it. For hormone testing, if I were to do it, I would do the urine-based test, which is the Dutch test. It's excellent, but I never start there. I always like to start with blood work, which you're not going to get full labs done from your GP. You can try. I mean, most people won't believe me, and then they go to their GP, and then they spend time, which is your currency as well. And then they don't get full testing, and they go, well, can I just get what's missing? And I go, no, it doesn't work that way, because it all has to be done in one go. That way we can assess for patterns, right? Like, it can't be piecemeal. Like, I got this one done on Monday, and then when I got on Thursday, it doesn't work that way. So we have resources in practice where people can go, who they can go to, whether you're Canada, US, UK, or Australia, where you can actually purchase a requisition. I purchase a requisition every single 6 months, and I see it as an investment in my health. Blood work we can see a lot of clues on what might be happening. So for example, one of the markers of your white blood cells, called eosinophils, is if it is elevated, it is a big red flag that there might be parasitic infection. Okay, it is not the only way that we can evaluate for parasites, but it's one of the telltale signs if that marker is elevated. It's also important to understand that your labs, when you're looking at from a doctor perspective, they're looking at it based on lab ranges, which are outdated and are not the ranges your body is required to function in. By the time that you are outside those ranges, your issue has gone chronic and it could have been prevented. So your doctor's usually saying to you, oh, everything's normal, but based on what? Outdated lab ranges? Sure. That are very broad? Sure. We do offer stool testing, but I do use it, but I've kind of moved a little bit away from stool testing. We use bioresonance testing in practice, which I understand for people are pretty hardcore science, might feel super woo for them. But the reasons why that I like bioresonance, and it took me a while to really have faith in it. And I had seen like my test come back, some patients test who are willing to try it, and the level of accuracy was astounding. So bioresonance testing essentially tests for for resonance, whether they're pathogenic in nature. It helps us to get an understanding of how drainage pathways are operating. So drainage pathways include things like your pooper, your liver, your gallbladder, your lungs, your kidneys. Are you eliminating efficiently? Because if we have this thought about, in the health industry, that it's detox, detox, kill, 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 kill. But if you're trying to detox and your drainage pathways aren't open, it's like trying to kick out the drunk guy from the bar with the doors locked. It doesn't work, right? You got to make sure you're eliminating. It's extremely important. Otherwise, parasites hold 6 to 8 times their body weight in toxins. So if you're not eliminating those, you're going to be reabsorbing a ton and you're going to feel horrible. So bioresonance testing is definitely one of the areas that we look at. We start at, and then blood work is the second thing. Sometimes I order a stool test, but parasites don't just live in your poop. They burrow in the mucous membranes. They hide out in the liver and gallbladder. Flukes, which hide out in your liver, they can actually burrow up to 50,000 eggs in your liver. People don't know that. They can live in your lymphatic system as well. They can live in virtually every single organ. So, stool testing can miss a ton. So in practice, what I prefer to do, people go, do you have a parasite cleanse that you would recommend? And I'm like, there might be some practitioners who may. I don't work that way because I want people to get results. So for me to get you results, I have to evaluate which drainage pathway is under functioning, so I can provide maybe a more aggressive approach to that specific organ. And then I can go, oh, these are some other things that came up. Now I can dose you accordingly. But if I don't have the data and also that patient intake, because we address people, not just paper, then how on earth am I going to provide a proper protocol that's going to give you the intended results? You might get marginal results from some parasite cleanses. Maybe you've even eliminated some nasty critters. Also understand, when you're doing parasitic detoxing, so much of those parasites are microscopic. I mean, some of them are really gnarly. I've got loads of pictures. I literally think that we should get t-shirts made of I pooped out a parasite, because I have patients who sometimes they send it, or friends who send me do you want to see what came out of me? And I'm eating my lunch. Yes, come on, send it to me. And I love having that folder with all these critters, because I think it's fascinating. It's of course your nervous system has been wired tight. You've been under a certain level of physical stress for a really long time. So functionally, that's where I generally like to start. And if I need to order more testing down the road, then we can get a little bit targeted and go from there.
Love that. I love that. And so I know that can sound, for those listening out there, that can sound like literally a whole new can of worms, but I love
no pun intended.
No pun intended. Yeah. I really love, the simple free resources that you laid out earlier, I think are so essential. So everybody just, start there. And then Melissa, how can people work with you?
Yeah, so there's several things. So if you want to find me, the place that I'm most active is Instagram. So you just find Sexy Food Therapy and I'll pop up. I have 2 options of working together. So either option 1 is Sexy Lady Balls, is my hormone membership platform. It's a low cost per month platform. So it really helps people who might be a little bit more financially strapped. It does not include testing, because $57 a month is not going to include testing and a consult and a protocol. But it does offer people the opportunity to upgrade to get testing, and all of our testing kit packages has a protocol and the consult included in the cost of that package. So that's option 1. And we have people, whether they have PCOS or fibroids or Hashimoto's or post-menopause, it's all walks of life in that hormonal sphere. Option 2 is my online school, which is called Sexy Autoimmune Academy. That recently launched earlier this year. When we have launched it, it sells out like that. I end up mentoring a group of 30 women to learn how to become their own healer. What that means is that within the cost of enrollment includes, I think, 4 or 5 different tests. It's quite comprehensive. you learn, you have obviously a consult and a protocol to kind of springboard from, but you actually learn how a crash course in what I do for a living so that you can apply it to your own health, to your own family and maybe friends. You learn how to develop your own protocols. You learn how to read functional tests. We're now going to be rolling out by the end of this year practicum. So like these dummy cases of like, Jane Doe has the following issues. What would you do if you were her practitioner? And it's not teaching people necessarily how to be a practitioner, but there are some people who come who are like moms who have like zero knowledge of health or science. And then there's other people who come in who are trained practitioners who are like, I want to learn how to work in the same capacity that you do in practice. So we really do have people from all walks of life. That's going to be a much higher price point. But again, it's a school, it's not a program or a membership. So you have to think of this as a piece of education.
I love that.
Awesome.
Well, we love the work you're doing in the world, Melissa. And it's been such a wonderful, juicy, beautiful conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you guys dug it. I hope everyone listening dug it.
Sure they will. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.